Hi there, I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com, and this is my Smart American Accent training. Welcome to our Saturday live question and answer class, where I take your questions about American English pronunciation and American accent. Feel free to put your questions in the chat at any time. And at the start of class today, we're going to talk about a couple of phrases to help you sound more fluent and talk about how native speakers pronounce these words and phrases. So, looking at the words, we have supposed versus supposed to. So when we have the past tense of suppose, the letters ed say the d sound, because the word suppose, the letters sc say the z sound. So if I say, for example, I supposed, we supposed, we should have the z and the d sounds here. But how we most commonly use this word supposed is in the phrase I was supposed to, or he was supposed to, together with the to. And for whatever reason, native speakers will no longer use this Z sound in this phrase. So as we move from the end of supposed to, we basically drop the ED and we change the Z of suppose to an S sound. So I've rewritten that here for you with two S's, like in the word glass, supposed to. I'm supposed to do it, supposed to. Just so you can recognize that it's actually technically an error of pronunciation, but it's the way we do it as native speakers. So we're supposed to be there. Also, sometimes our to, if I'm supposed to do it, to do, we may keep the oo there, or we may also change that to more of a vowel schwa, like to, supposed to. I'm supposed to go, supposed to. So our stress is on the po syllable. We have that devoiced Z sound to an S, and we sometimes also reduce that word to. The same thing happens in the word used. So for example, I used it. I'm going to clearly use the Z and the D sound. It's a used car, or I used it, so both as an adjective and as a verb. Use has the letter, or has the sound of Z. So when it's made into past tense or into an adjective, the letters ed say the d sound, used. We used it, a used vehicle, etc. But if we put it together with in the phrase I used to see him, I used to speak German, I used to do that, same thing happens where instead of our typical z pronunciation, we move to the s sound, and as we move into the word to. So I used to think so. And again, our to can become more of a t sound. So thinking of that as a schwa. I used to go, I used to talk a lot, I used to be there, etc. So these are a couple of examples of how pronunciation changes in fluent use, and something to recognize that I don't want to use it if I'm saying that's used. I don't want to say that's used. That would sound incorrect. But for whatever reason, as used to, we basically drop that D, change this to an S, and go right to our T sound. This was a question from one of our viewers, a very helpful thing to notice. They had heard a lot of Americans saying supposed to or supposed to, and they wanted to know if that was correct. And so again, technically it's not, but it's what native speakers do. So in that sense, it is truly what you'll hear, and it is just a reduction and a change that we use in everyday fluent speech. So I hope that's helpful for you if you've noticed that. And I think these are phrases that we all use a lot, and it would be helpful to be able to sound like a native speaker and use them and understand what you're hearing as you're listening to native speakers as well. Welcome. It's nice to see so many of you here on this Labor Day weekend. Here in the US, it's a holiday on Monday for Labor Day. So it's a 3-day weekend for a lot of people. Feel free to put your questions in the chat at any time. And if you're watching this as a replay, you can leave questions in the comments. I do go back and review those, give you answers, and send you resources in terms of videos or things on our website that can answer your question as well. So let's turn to our viewer questions now. We have a question about the words enable versus unable. So in enable, this will have primary stress on able, and the first syllable N is completely unstressed. So enable, we're going to have letter E saying the I sound. Enable, we'll have the true A. So it sounds like enable. In order to enable the class, we can enable that for you. Versus unable, I'm unable to do so, unable. I'm going to have, again, the same able, but I'll have some secondary stress on the un, so this won't get reduced. So I'll have the sound, the schwa, or even a stress schwa, unable. So I'm unable to do that. We're going to enable it, we're unable to. So the in can be really reduced. The un doesn't get reduced here because it's the un prefix. We need to be able to hear that schwa sound to know that we're saying able versus unable. Good. I believe we covered this recently, even as recently as last week, but I hope that clarifies that for you. Great. We have a question about the phrase pretty good. How are you doing? I'm pretty good, pretty good. So the viewer is saying that they're not really noticing the RE sound, more like pretty good, pretty good. We do want that R there though, pretty good. The good is going to be stressed, and so pretty is going to be really quick. We do, for this letter E, we do use an I sound, so you're going to hear it like pretty, pretty good, and good is going to be stretched. Pretty, it's pretty good. If you drop that E, pretty good, it's going to sound incorrect. It's going to sound like a speech error. So you just have to be nice and light and quick on the first two syllables on the word pretty. One thing you could do is try to think about building it from the R, ritty, and pretty, if that helps you. But yeah, typically we don't drop that R, it just goes by very quickly. That's a great observation. Thank you. Okay, we have a question about the phrase, what did you do? What did you do? So if I say that word by word, what did you do? You can hear how it doesn't sound fluent. The viewer's question is, can it be pronounced like, what do you do? So basically, let's talk about the reductions that happen here. What we don't want is, we don't want what do you do, because that would sound like, that's what we do for what do you do. So what do you do becomes what do you. So that reduction does happen. So what do you do? What do you do? And that happens. So the oohs can become schwas. What do you do? And we link the T and the D together, and we just use one flap there. What do you do? In what did you do? What did you? This becomes more of whatted. So again, you can write it this way as well. What did ya? So what did you do? Again, we have a reduction for the U to the ya. And then the whatted, we just use one flap there. We don't need what did, but rather whatted. But we need to keep the I of did, or it'll sound like what do you. That becomes what do ya. What did you do? What did you? What did you do? What did you do? And you'll hear as the did you, sometimes you'll hear that kind of as a what did ya, or the did ya. You can either do that as a d and a ya sound, did ya, or sometimes you'll hear did ya. What did ya do? What did ya? Both are correct, and it depends on where you are, but just because the d and y together ends up kind of sometimes sounding more like a j. Very good. Excellent. Your other phrases were how do you know? How'd you know? So again, what did you tell? Why did she tell you? Why'd you tell you? Yeah, so some of your reductions that you've written out, we don't really do. It's more, it depends on the did or the or do. So this pattern will be the same for what did she do, it will still become what did, and what did you, or why did you, or why do you. So do generally can become duh, and did stays did. You can become ya in all of these cases, though. You may find that my Real Talk playlist and my Real Talk course is helpful for you. In that playlist, I'm showing you all these types of reductions, looking at specific phrases and how we change the vowel sounds in fluent speech. And in the course, the Real Talk course, I teach you how to use that technique on specific phrases, as well as listening in TV and movies and looking at examples of written words versus spoken speech, how we link things together, how we reduce sounds. So that's a great resource for this more sort of advanced training, advanced fluent speech. The challenge is if we reduce the wrong way or the wrong things, it'll sound like it means something else, or it'll sound incorrect as opposed to just how native speakers do things fluently. So it's a little bit tricky in there. Once you get the patterning, though, you should be able to apply it, and it will really help you with your fluency and rhythm. Thanks for bringing that up. Those were some great phrases to look at. Okay, we have a question about whether or not we pronounce the R sound in orator. Yes, almost without exception, whenever we have the letter R, we're going to say an sound in American English. Unlike in British English, where R's in the middle and ends of words, they just pronounce the vowel differently. In American English, orator is going to sound like orator. So we definitely do that R sound. There's a few exceptions, like words like governor or government. Sometimes that we tend to do governor. We tend to sometimes lose this R, like governor, which is not really correct, but there's a very few exceptions. Most of the time, whenever you see the letter R, you should say an R in American English. And it is correct to say governor or government. We just sometimes drop those before the N because it's a little bit challenging to say. Thank you. That's a good question. Okay. Another follow-up to what did you do? Yeah, so good point. In what did you do? Yeah, so what did, we can write that like what did, but what we still pronounce that the same way. Still sounds like what did, with the flap there, what did. So same thing, I have a video talking about that would. We say that like that'd, and it sounds the same, that'd. So as we have a T apostrophe D, this is how we would write, how we pronounce what'd. We typically don't contract it in writing. We'd write what did, but we don't say what did. We say what'd. So even though these two are the same, and that'd sounds like that'd. Same thing with it'd, that'd, what'd, etc. That's how we pronounce them. Very good. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay. We have a question about the phrase horror stories. So horror is a very tough word, even for native speakers, to pronounce correctly. I tend to have to slow down to get those or-ers. It's basically like the first part, the first letter is O-R, do say or. So we have or, horror, and then this one, these letters O-R at the end say the sound in this word. As I'm saying the r, I have to kind of move from my or into my next It's not really broken. It's not horror, but horror. So that's what makes it so difficult, is kind of doing that r combination. And then if we add stories at the end, that makes it even harder because we have another or. So then we have stories. So going slowly, horror stories, speeding it up, horror stories, horror stories. You can hear how even when I'm saying horror, it kind of merges. It almost becomes like one syllable, horror. So that's why I have to slow down if I want to be very clear, to make sure that you can hear that it's two syllables and that we don't just have a word like whore, but rather horror. Yeah, very good. We have another question about whether or not we use the sound A or I in the first syllable of words vivacious and vivacity. So I think you can use either. So I just now modeled it as vivacious. You can also say vivacious. The main stress is on the ve, so that has to have a clear vowel. But you'll hear both vi and vi for that first syllable. Let's double check that in the dictionary to make sure that's correct. I know that people say that. Whether or not they're both correct is another question. So we'll take out our Merriam-Webster's, one of my favorite references. I'm looking for the V, vivacious or vivacious, and vivacity or vivacity. Vivacity sounds like less common to me, so we'll double check and I'll get you the reference. So vivacious. Just a moment as I'm looking it up. I think it's always good. I often use online dictionaries, but of course, as I'm streaming, it's easier for me to use the printed dictionary. So vitamin, vivify. So vivacious, yes. So they list vivacious first they list it with the schwa, like vivacious. That would be the same as vivacious, but they have also vi, so you can say vivacious. So when they say also in the dictionary, it means that it wasn't originally correct, but it's now becoming correct. When they list both as correct pronunciations, then it's officially correct. So I would say vivacious without the I is more correct, but many people do say vivacious as well. Yeah, and same thing for vivacity. They only have they have the they have the vivacity. Okay. I think I tend to personally say vivacity, but maybe vivacious. So interchangeable, probably. Great question. Thank you for your patience as I was looking that up. I just, when I am making a video, of course, I carefully research pronunciation to give you an accurate answer. Sometimes in the live class, I'm going with what comes to mind, but I am not infallible in terms of having pronunciation errors myself occasionally, and so having references like being able to look something up in the dictionary is a very good resource, and understanding how to read those symbols. You can learn about spelling and sounds and pronunciation of any word in our Sounds of English course, where we show you how to read the dictionary. So you would see vi with secondary stress for vivacity, or vi or va, with these symbols for the I sound and the sound. This one is the I. So as you're learning about pronunciation, that course is really helpful for understanding IPA, but also really for understanding what letter I typically says in words. Most often it's going to say the I sound, which is this symbol, in words like it and did and different. And also in unstressed syllables, it's much more often going to say the I sound rather than the I sound. When it's going to say the I diphthong, it's more common in words like light or night or sight, where we have a different spelling. And also, of course, the word I by itself. So the Sounds of English course is going to walk you through all of the sounds, both vowels and consonants, look at spelling, accent error patterns, and how to correct them. It's a great way to build a strong foundation to pronounce any word you like confidently and easily. You can check that out on our website, speechmodification.com. All right, let's take a few more questions and then we'll wrap up for today. We have a question about does what are you doing sound similar like what are you doing? So what are versus water. So water becomes, it's a little bit different because the vowel sound in what is vowel schwa, that sounds like So in what are you doing, it's going to sound more like water. So the R is going to get reduced to an sound. Water, what are you doing? In water, what you have here is the vowel. So it's going to sound a little different. That you'll still have the same rhythm, first syllable stress and then an but this one sounds like water versus water. Very different vowel in the two. Yeah, great question. But a good observation that water becomes water. That's also something we talk about in our Real Talk course, and I have a number of videos for phrases starting with what are and how we reduce that to what are. Very good. Okay. We have a question about the word cupboard. So even though it looks like cup and board, we don't say either part of this word this way. Cupboard is stressed on the first syllable. It has the vowel schwa, and then the second syllable is unstressed. It has vowel so it sounds like cupboard. Cupboard. Yeah, in the cupboard. This is typical American English pronunciation. Cupboard. Good. Yeah, good question. I do have a video for that as well that goes into more detail. So after class, if there's something that we didn't cover or something you'd like to see the more detailed version of, leave me a quick comment and I'll put the link there for you. You can research that and check it out. We have a question about the phrase at the end of the day. How that sounds in fluent native speech. So at the end of the day is going to be stressed. Our at can get a little reduced at the. This runs together. We have a stop T, so it sounds like at the end, at the end. So actually, you can say at the end, but it's more correct and easier to do at the end, because when we have a word starting with a vowel, our word the changes to the at the end of the. End is going to link to of, end of the. Here we'll have the schwa, end of the day, and then our cleared day. At the end of the day, at the end of the day. So what we notice here in this type of fluent speech is that the length of day is almost the same length as all of these other words at the end of the day. Da, 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 da. We really want to stretch out on day, and then that's why we make these changes in at the end of the, so we can say it smoothly and quickly because it's the unstressed part. You may have a little more length on end at the end of the day because end is also important for meaning in this phrase. Great question. Thank you. Okay, let's take a look. We have a question about the pairs smoothed it out, and clothed myself and clothed myself. So for both smoothed it and clothed we have to be careful if we're trying to differentiate to make sure we have the d sound, smoothed it out. It's easier in smoothed it out because the d can link to the I. So we would have smoothed it out. So we link that together as well. So it kind of sounds like did out. Smoothed it out. In a phrasal verb like smooth out, the stress goes on out. If I was saying it's smooth, we don't really say that, he smoothed. But if we're saying something like take versus take on, usually the verb gets stressed. In phrasal verbs, the preposition at the end gets stressed because that's where the meaning lies. So smoothed it out versus smooth it out. There we can link our th right to our it, smooth it. So it sounds kind of like smooth it out. Again, our t will be flapped. Smooth it out. Smoothed it out, smooth it out. But when we get to clothed myself, the clothed, we just go right from the th to the d. And then we have to go to an So basically we have to make a little break there. Clothed myself versus clothe myself. Clothe, we just go right from the th. Clothe my. That's a little easier. Clothed my. Clothed. We have to use this D, otherwise we won't hear that we're using the past tense of clothe. Yeah, definitely a challenging combination to do that voiced D, like clothed or breathed it in. Easier when we're linking to a vowel like smoothed it or breathed it. Great. Welcome, everyone. Those of you just joining us, feel free to put your questions in the chat. If you're watching this later on, you can leave a question or comment in a comment below. We have one of our channel members here. Welcome. Nice to have you here. The question, is there some kind of tip to process ideas like a noun with too many attribute nouns? In my native tongue, there's no such thing, so I'm reading one too large like version control system. Note that all of them are nouns. Okay, so when we have compound nouns, we do a little bit of a different stress pattern. So your example of version control system, I think that was your word. If I'm just talking about a system, then system is going to be stressed because it comes at the end. So if I'm talking about he's in the system, system is the most important. But if I have something like control system, that's a compound noun, then my stress is going to be on control. When there's three, version control system. In this case, I would say there's some secondary stress on version, but my main stress is going to be on control. Because I could say control system by itself, I can't say version control by itself. So version is kind of a tacked on additional noun. Let me think of another 3-word compound noun. So for 2-word compound nouns, first of all, we have compound nouns where it's one word, right? Like baseball. That's when you take 2 nouns and you put them together to make one new noun. Those are stressed on the first syllable as primary stress, but they have secondary stress on the second syllable. So baseball versus something like basing, let's say. In basing, there's no stress on the second syllable. It's just a clear vowel here. But in baseball, we have some stress, so we hold on to that clear vowel of all, baseball. Then we also have 2-word compound nouns like control system, or another example would be how about car keys, where normally I'd say I need my keys. Keys being the last noun would be stressed. When we have a compound noun, this functions as the noun. So both words are as one, and so we stress on the first part of it. So rather than I need my car keys, I need my car keys. And this is definitely one of the challenges for non-native speakers because it doesn't really follow the overall basic rules we have, which is stress the last content noun, content word, noun, verb, etc. in the phrase. For compound ones, we are stressing the first of the 2 compounds. I think when there's multiple, then that depends on the phrase, depends on the attribute. This is something I can cover in more detail in a members class for you as well. But I do have a couple of members classes and non-members classes here on the channel for compound nouns, so I'll redirect you to those. Let's say another example, let's say the Democratic Party. If I just have the Democratic Party, party is going to be stressed, and this is going to be an adjective. If I'm saying the Democratic Party candidate, then I'm going to have some stress on party and on candidate. So I think this is sort of like your version control system, where when there's three, this would function as compound noun all together, where we're going to have some stress on party and on the final word candidate. So if you have some other examples for me, do feel free to leave those in a comment, and I'll look at them example by example. Generally speaking, we have to kind of stress on all of the nouns when we have multiple nouns in a row that go together. And we don't want extra stress on the final one usually. So in general, looking at two-word compound nouns is a great building block. There's one, building block, where we stress on building, not block. And then when we have more in a row, you're going to just have some stress on each of the nouns. So it tends to be a little slower in fluent speech on those types of patterns. I hope that helps answer your question. Thank you. That's a really good point that you're bringing up. Okay. We have a question about the phrase, I don't want to go. So I don't want to go. Obviously, I'm not going to say it word by word like that. We have a couple of different things we do. So first of all, you're right. Do not becomes don't. I don't. We tend to drop this T in fluent speech. So it'll be like, I don't want. And then we either can do want to go. I don't want to go. Don't want to go. Don't want to go. Often we also drop this T as well, and it becomes more like I don't wanna. In that case, we tend to use a stopped, unreleased T. I don't wanna go. I don't wanna go. So that's how I would say it. I don't wanna go. If I'm trying to be a little more careful, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. So either don't want to with a T and no T here, or stop T here and wanna, don't wanna. I would say wanna, if you just say it by itself or we don't write it, it's pretty casual sounding. But even in professional speech, do you wanna do that? We tend to change want to wanna, even professionally. That's a great phrase. Thank you. I'm really liking talking about these real talk phrases. I think that's something that often it's helpful to sound more fluent and to be understood, and also to understand what you're hearing, because we don't speak word by word. And one of the challenges as a listener is to get used to these types of reductions and linkings that we do. You can learn more about that in our Real Talk playlist here on the channel, and also in our Real Talk course on our website, speechmodification.com. That course is just $2. It's really inexpensive, but it's a great way to get a lot of resources and understanding about these reductions and how we sound in fluent speech. Okay, great. We have a question about the difference between sauce and salt, and also shock and shark. So for sauce, we have the ah vowel, and it sounds like the word saw. So I saw the sauce. I'm putting two S's here because if I put one S, it would sound like saws, but it's not voiced there. Salt, salt, is we don't really say salt. We don't use the ah here or the ah, salt. We use more of a schwa, salt, salt. So it sounds kind of like this, salt. That's one that strikes me as odd. So again, I'm going to look that one up in Merriam-Webster for you, because that spelling of AL makes us think makes me think, even as a native speaker, of more of an ah or an ah sound. But if I hear myself saying it past the salt, I feel like I'm using a schwa there. So let me just double check. This may be something where my regional accent may be affecting it as well. If I'm saying salt and pepper, ah, salt, I feel like there's a kind of strange vowel there in that word. Okay, so looking at salt in the dictionary, I see that they have it as a salt. So yeah, interesting. Salt. Alt. Unfortunately, I don't know what they use for the O here. Salt. Sol. Yeah, so they're actually saying to use the all, like salt. So they're saying kind of the same as we would use in the verb all, which is an aw, salt. But I feel like we tend to reduce that. If I try to say salt, it sounds weird to me, salt. I think it just gets reduced maybe a little bit more to this kind of a sound. So in sauce, you're really opening up for that rounded ah. In salt, because of the L, we're closing it a little bit more. And probably the sound that comes before my schwa. So maybe we have an salt. I think it goes between an ah and an sound. That's a tricky word for sure. Okay, great. Thank you for that question. And then we also have a question. Your second question was about shock and shark. So for shock, we have the ah vowel, shock. Shark, we have the R diphthong. So thinking about we are sharks, and for shock, thinking more like my father had a shock. So matching those vowels, ah versus R. Good. Sometimes using other words to help you match can be helpful there. Okay. We have a question about I was sat instead of I was sitted here. Yeah, we wouldn't say I was sitted. I was sat here. That would be like someone else sat you there. If we're just talking about I sat here, we would just use I sat. But sitted, we don't use that. So the waiter sat them at the table. I was sat here by the waiter. Kind of uncommon. Okay, and another question going back a little bit. Question about edited it. Edited it. So this one actually sounds like edited it. Edited it. So I edited and I edited it because this links together. Very good. Great. Okay, a couple more, and then we'll sign off for today. If I don't get to everyone's second and third questions, my apologies. I'm trying to make sure I prioritize getting at least one question answered for each of the viewers today. You can always leave a comment after class, and I'll come back to you with some answers for your questions. We have a question about lift and leap. So here we have the I vowel, like in it, and here we have the E vowel, like in eat. So thinking about it lifts, and also for the f, we have a continuing sound, ft, lift. I'm not holding it for a long time because I'm ending in the T, but lift it lifts. I lift. You want to make sure you can hear that f sound continuing. Leap. We're going to either burst out that air, leap, with a p sound, or often we don't release that. So for the p sound, your lips come together and close and fully stop the air. Leap. Versus lift, ft. You should hear that air escaping for the f, and then also for the t sound. So for leap, I would just write it like that, leap. Lift, ft. We also have lip, would have just the I vowel, different from the E vowel. You can get help for I and E in my videos for that, as well as in our Sounds of English course. We walk through that difference and helping you make a clear differentiation between those two vowel sounds. Great. Okay. We have a question about talking to yourself in English and how to do that. So yeah, I think that's a great idea, actually. The more you can speak out loud in English, even if you're just talking to yourself, it's a great way to practice, to become more fluent, to work on your accent and your pronunciation. And it makes you tends to make you feel more confident when you're speaking to others. So I do actually have some videos talking about expressing your thoughts out loud, speaking out loud, narrating what you're doing. These are all great ways to practice. Sometimes we don't always have other partners to communicate with, but we still tend to improve in our speech fluency and pronunciation and accent the more we're able to just speak. So talking out loud to yourself is great. I guess the place where you would be cautious about that is out in public, in case someone, that we maybe want to do that in our heads when we're around other people, but when you're alone, as much as you want, talk out loud to yourself. It's a great way to practice. Okay. So we have a question about, also the words analyze, analysis, and analytics. So here we have some different rhythms. And that's why even though they have similar spelling, they have different sounds because the rhythm is different. So analytics. So for analyze, it sounds like we have the true a vowel in the beginning, first syllable stressed. Analyze. And then our Y says the I diphthong. Analysis has second syllable stress. So now our first letter A sounds like and we have our a vowel in that second syllable, and then our Y becomes an So we have analysis, analyze, and then for analytics, our stress is on the lit syllable. So we have, but secondary stress here. So we have our a back in the beginning, analytics, with this T becoming a flap, sounding a little more like a D. So that's really about the rhythm. First syllable stress, second syllable stress, and third syllable stress. That's where we're going to have our clear vowel. And because this one has third syllable stress, we also have secondary stress here with a clear vowel on the first syllable. Okay, wonderful. We went a little long in our class today, but we started a little early, so we had time for a slightly longer class here on this holiday Labor Day weekend. Thank you so much for being a part of class today. Wonderful questions and really great topics. Nice to see so many of you here. I'll be back again tomorrow with our word of the day. And of course, every day we have our daily word of the day videos. If you have a question that I didn't get to today, we will have class again next Saturday. You can attend live. You can also leave comments on this video or any of my videos, and I'll give you resources, send you to things here on the channel that you can watch to help you, or I'll cover your word in a future word of the day. As I mentioned several times earlier in the class today, we have a lot of free and inexpensive resources on the website, speechmodification.com. So do check out those online courses if you're interested. Thanks so much for watching the videos, for liking, sharing, commenting. Special shout out to those of you who have subscribed to the channel. Thank you for your support. And especially those of you who have joined as channel members. I truly appreciate your support. And we have a new members video coming soon with some of your recent questions. So I look forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much for being a part of class today. I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com. Remember, if you want to sound like a native speaker, you can do it. speechmodification.com. Bye, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you in our next class.